Good morning.
Good
Welcome to the
morning.
Women Fantasy Authors YouTube channel. I'm your host, Janet Hinker, and my guest today is Marie Judson. Hello, Marie. Glad to have you.
Oh, I'm happy
Hello.
to be here. Thank you
Yeah,
for
great.
inviting me.
Yes, we belong to the same writers group, and we've been chatting for a while. I'm glad to finally get her on the show. Marie writes both fantasy and science fiction, and of course, we'll be talking about her fantasy series today. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you, Marie, about your background. You have a master's in depth psychology, and I wondered if that degree and what you studied helped you write the book, informed you about the content of your story.
Well, I think it did. I was actually in a PhD program and
Okay,
um I had tried to do some writing before I did that and it really didn't come to me. And then I had a lot of angst and tension around the PhD program and so sought depth psychology and studying dreams and all and learning to go within and really reflect deeply. And so when I left the PhD program, the story I had written the original story for a contest for a Belgian pagan newsletter, a story contest for Samhain or Halloween, and it won the contest, but it also became braided dimensions. But at that point, I felt like I could go in and the characters would speak to me of what their emotions would be and all. And I feel like that kind of came from my own inner work and delving into the depth psychology. And then I got into symbols and
right, right.
a lot of that comes
Yeah.
through in this
Okay,
story.
I'm going to be asking you about that in more detail in a little bit. Um,
Okay.
Now, the setting involves time travel. That's what the series is about. And often when I read time travel, there's a portal and there's one person going back and forth back in time. And you've expanded way beyond that. You've got several people traveling in back and forth using different methods. Could you talk about a little bit about how that works in the story? How people are moving around, or at least how you imagine it?
Sure. So the first time that that Kay goes to the past, she's sort of led by Baird, who comes from medieval time, and she later learns that he was actually seeking her or the person who resonates with the same um, whatever it is, mental register. And so she's sort of the where she is in Pomo Bluffs becomes, it sort of transmutes into a path to the past. But later on, the oak tree where she first found him, it turns out to be quite a portal for others.
Right, right. Um, uh, it just was interesting to see the different ways that they evolve back and forth in time, and it develops throughout the story. But we don't want to give away too many spoilers.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it does change, and I feel like that is human nature to evolve. I mean, even my cats evolve over time. So I think that the fact that she learns a little more, but she stays pretty shaky about the whole process of this.
Right. It's a little scary at times because she's not sure where she is or how she's got there, how long she's going to stay, and how she's going to get back. So there are
Yeah,
times when it's very tenuous about, oh my gosh, is she going to be stuck? And but that's part of the intrigue of the story, I think.
yeah.
Um, Another piece that I really enjoyed and wanted to ask you about was the concept of the magical yarn and also weaving designs and patterns into material that could be used for magic. So I wanted to ask you about that. Did you find something or learn something about the use of those kind of concepts back in time in history?
No, but some of when I started doing depth work, I also looked at magic a lot in its various forms, like the runes and what people used to believe about magic and runes. And some of you can find ideas about weaving a spell or an intention by braiding, like with each stitch or with each braid,
Right.
you're working your intention. So it shows how it's really an inner process, but it can manifest in a physical, or the physical can give you an anchor to project your magic.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm not a artist or a weaver in any sense of the imagination, but I really appreciate that those arts. And
Yeah.
it and I could visualize it really clearly. The other interesting thing that happened is that, if I'm remembering correctly, the actual yarn shop where she could go and get these, actually that actually came to the present. Kay is our person living in the present. Is that, am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, yeah. Of course, we don't know, and I don't know if we ever. She's always trying to find out. Can Elvine, did she create a whole picture? Did she make KC the hallway leading into this tiny yarn shop? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely a connection between the times, but we can't always tell what's a spirit travel there, and what's really being brought.
Well, I love the image of it. And, you know, and the kid in me who used to imagine those kind of places and going there in my imagination that was so real, I really got into that scene and was like, oh, this is so cool. It's actually, she's actually finding this secret passageway, you know. I think it really speaks to the fantasy of our, you know, the memories of our child, at least those of us that saw the world a little differently,
Oh
you
yeah.
know. Yeah.
I was a fantasy reader from an early age.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay,
The
yeah,
Narnia
exactly.
Chronicles, the stories like that, where there is a portal or a room or some way that you
Yes.
get
I
between.
think it's fun to think about those things and wish and desire that they actually were true. And, you know, there's still so much we don't understand, right?
That's true. And again, I think you can make metaphors or parallels to
Sure.
the magic we can perform in
Yeah.
our inner selves too.
Now, the other thing I wanted to talk with you about, which is really interesting, is when Kay goes back, she's connected to basically what we call a doppelganger, a person that looks like her so much that when she goes back in time, people think that she is this character, Kina.
Yes.
And could you talk a little bit about how they're connected? Because they're connected both physically and it seems emotionally and spiritually in some ways. So how did you see that when you were writing those two characters?
Well, I kind of relate it to, I'm really interested in ancestry, so I can picture having someone who's very like me in a
Hmm.
thousand years ago. Um, but Kina finds a kindred spirit in the future. I'm pretty sure that's how it starts. And so there's no accident
Right.
that she's being pulled, and Elvine, the elder wise woman, is orchestrating some of their connections. And she seems to play almost as if the past did hold her in it
Hmm.
coming from the future, because they seem to almost need her in their various dangerous situations. And
Right. So she's called on to help in a situation which we can maybe talk about a little bit later.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, there is a villain in the story who has nefarious plans, obviously, and they're all called together to try to defeat him. And he's doing some, well, I won't say exactly what happens because that would be a spoiler. So
Although
it,
it happens some of
yeah,
that happens pretty early in the story.
yeah, yeah. And the back to Kina and Kay, things get even more interesting because Baird, who comes to connect with Kay in the future and bring her back, he she falls in love with him and he's already involved with Kina. So it's like there's this triad, almost a love triangle, or it's a love story, but it's a very interesting one because he's seeing them in at different times. So uh, I've only read the first book, so I don't know yet how things work out. But
Okay.
they're in love with the same guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Although Kina's life is changing, and she's always been a kind of a woman ahead of her times as
Yes,
an educated healer. And he's been gone a lot. He's a bard, and he travels, and a free bard. So they've lived a lot of their lives apart, and
right.
and she has some very interesting, Kina has some very interesting things to develop in her own life. So
As we move forward, yeah, right. Okay. The other interesting thing about them being connected, however it turns out, ancestrally or their souls are connected, or however it turns out, is that they're able to share their knowledge and talents. So tell us about some of the things that Kay learns through her connection with Kina that she actually brings back into her life.
well, so she's desperately wanting to find, so she's a professor of ancient languages. So the fact that she gets a little taste of a millennium ago just heats her.
Mm,
But and her faculty life is getting a little fraught. And so she really just gets hungry to return to that time. And in the process, she's hunting, she's studying, and little known to her, there's a lot of reciprocal effort at the other end. So she actually slips into Kina's mind. And
mm,
if that's not giving away too much. That happens pretty early in the book.
right, right.
But just being in her mind, there's a sort of mind meld where they they have their separate thoughts, but she pretty much fully embodies Kina's mind, or whatever are her conscious thoughts, at least. And then so she just gets language and weaving skills that
Wonderful.
she has no way to know where they came from. She knows the signs of the gypsies or wanderers of Wales. And yeah.
I love that part of it. And I loved also how you brought in the use of all the symbols that some of us have heard about, like the runes and some of the other ancient languages. So I assume you studied some of that because you use that a lot in the story.
Yeah, so I've studied the Ogham and the runes, partly just I just loved coming out of the depth time. I also just got into magical ideas that I can kind of pull on at the different times of the year. So I built a whole cycle of the year with runes, and you can kind of associate each season
Mm, mhm.
runes. And so I
Yeah.
studied them deeply, and there are ideas that were also magical associations with them back from the Nordic um, magical system, their seven worlds and all that. So yeah, I've studied all that.
Well, that's one of the things that I really enjoyed a lot about the story is how rich it was in detail of all these things that I find fascinating. I've studied some of it. So it makes the story so rich and interesting and draws us in with it's just such a rich magical tapestry that you've woven, speaking of a metaphor. So that's really cool. I also, when we go to Wales, and it in your descriptions, it feels like we're actually in a real place. Are you describing a real place in Wales? And have you actually been there?
I went to Wales a year before I published the book. So I went back and I changed details now that I had seen that very
Hmm.
part. But it's so fun to me that I picked out these locations from maps, and kind of looked on Google, Google Earth and things like that. But they fit so well. There's the town of Mahuntleth is where the winter fair is, and it's just this amazing place now that has this permaculture thing
Mm.
there, and um it and the little town of Borth on the coast, all of it I went and saw later, and I could picture everything, everything I had designed in the story fit the places.
Well, isn't it wonderful when it works out that way? It's just,
Yeah, it would have been awful if it hadn't, I suppose. But I feel like something kind of led me, and
right.
I grabbed a bit of it from my own ancestry because I do have
Oh,
Welsh
yes,
ancestry.
yes.
So some of it might have been coming through the cells or
Yeah,
whatever.
great. Yeah, it's obvious that comes through in the story. So let me take a moment here to share the screen so I can share your information.
Okay.
And so we've got your website and your contacts, and this is the first book in the series, the one that I've read that I love so much. And how we've got there are 3 books in the series, and is it complete with 3, Marie?
No, the fourth one is just coming out in it'll actually be coming out in February. So
Okay.
Past's Undone is the fourth book. And there may be a fifth. I have ideas about a little bit steampunk urban fantasy direction. So
Oh,
that
that's great. Let's see. I wanted to ask you, what are you're currently working on now? I know you've got a science fiction series going. Now,
yeah,
are
that's
you in
what
the middle of that?
yeah, right now I'm mostly deeply involved with my Lost Zen 2 series, and I'm
I
writing
love,
the fourth
um,
book.
I didn't share the book covers for that because it's science fiction, but please go to Marie's website and sign up for her newsletter. The book covers on that are out of this world, literally. So I can't wait to read that. Maybe we'll have you back and talk about that at a future date.
That'd be great.
And one last question before we close out today. I'm on your newsletter list, and occasionally you share collages about your dream work. Uh, can you tell me just a little bit about your dream work? And I mean, how is that just something you do for personal satisfaction? Do you use that in your story writing? How does that all fit in?
Oh, occasionally it does. I've had a few dreams that actually led me in the next step of a story. But mostly, well, I've always written down my dreams, and then I did that master's in depth psychology. And after I finished, someone from 2 cohorts and 1 cohort before me, we joined together into a dream group. So we share dreams every week.
Oh,
We
wow.
all each do our own side work, and one of the things I do is dream collages because I feel like it really brings it back to life in a sort of way that you can't always capture when you're just thinking about it.
Yeah, I've done it in the past. It's just been a long time. And the concept for my novel that I'm working on and getting ready to publish very soon came out of a dream. And I think that's probably very common for a lot of authors, that an image or an idea will come out of our dream state because do you problem solve in your dreams? I sometimes wake up in the morning with the solution to something I went to sleep on and couldn't solve.
Oh yeah, and it's sometimes called dream incubation. So
Ah,
you'll be churning over something at 1 in the morning, and wow, as I'm coming out of sleep, I'm saying sentences that will go into my book, or or I've resolved something else for my work, or yeah,
right.
definitely. Yeah.
Well, aren't we lucky to be at this point in our life where we can play around with this stuff and have access to all these resources? I feel really blessed to be part of the writing community, especially the fantasy community, and also to get to talk with people like you about things that I'm so interested in and fascinated about. So life is good, huh?
Isn't it wonderful?
It's
Yeah.
wonderful. Marie, I'm so grateful you came to talk with me today. Please, I will put her information in the box below the video. If you're liking this, please give us a thumbs up and sign up for the channel. I generally try to post a interview about once a month, depending on life, life, that whole thing about life. So Marie, thank you again. I look forward to talking with you again in the future, and we'll be in touch since we're close. We don't live that far away. Maybe sometime when you're down here, we can get together for a cup of coffee.
I love that.
I
Thank
would
you
love
so
it
much
too.
for having me, Janet.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today. And thank you for listening, all the listeners out there. And I will see you next time.
My pleasure. Take care.